Quality good men can't resist women with these 5 habits. In this video, you will discover what quality men are truly looking for and breaking through any stories that you may have had from girlfriends of what a man wants or doesn't want. Because sometimes you may get confused what a low vibrational and low quality man wants versus what a high quality man wants. And that, of course, leads to you being able to fully be pursued and protected and, of course, cherished and supported by the man that you desire. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Hey, I'm Antia Boyd, love expert with Magnetize Your Man, and together with my husband, Brody Boyd, we've been helping thousands of successful women all over the world to get a committed, connected, and long-term relationship that they desire fast over the last 20 years combined. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 5 is queen integrity. Now, there comes a time in the relationship, in the dating journey, where the man will consciously or unconsciously test you. And we'll see, where do your boundaries stand? How true are you to yourself? Now, what is queen integrity? It's the integrity of the queen. It's truly saying that what you think, what you say, and what you do is in true alignment. It also means that you truly hold your frame even in moments of highly charged moments or in arguments and confrontations. Now, what a woman does who's really truly embodying queen integrity is she's not shying away from confrontation. As a matter of fact, she will find a way to communicate her needs, her desires, her boundaries very early on. Because look, what I've seen so many times on the journey of my lovely ladies is when they don't do that, then they actually find out when they finally have the phone call, when they finally have the conversation, that it wasn't what they thought it would be. They didn't, it wasn't like that they were ridiculed or they made fun of or they were judged or yelled at or attacked the way that they made up in their mind, right? The more time passes, the more stories you can create in your mind. And look, the mind can only be the summary of your past, right? The mind can't be anything else. So if you've experienced abuse or if you experienced neglect, right? If you experienced having dismissive parents, then that's what your mind will then project. However, if you find the queen integrity inside of yourself, like the quality woman that attracts the right man into her life, then you will actually be able to break out of all these stories and all these loops that you create, mental loops, emotional loops, and ruminating, sometimes over topics that don't even matter, right? And because, of course, you have queen integrity, it speaks directly to the king inside of himself. Now, when you have queen integrity, that truly means you are truly connected to the quote-unquote bitch part inside of you. That's the one who sets boundaries, who is self-focused, right? Because she's actually just caring about herself. But of course, that is then balanced with the doormat. And the doormat is that part that gives all of her power away, is so other-focused, but extremely loving and compassionate, right? So you want to be both, right? You want to be attuned, but you also want to be able to trust yourself to set boundaries at any given moment rather than continue to give the wrong man the benefit of the doubt, right? So what I love about the queen is even if the man is going through like a hard time, and I hear this from my women all the time, well, I can't have the conversations this week because he has surgery. I can't have the conversations this week because his cat got sick. I can't have the conversations this week because his child has problems in school. I can't, go fill in the blank. So there's always going to be a reason why you can't have the conversation. But the queen is holding her frame and is actually saying, so what, now what, right? We all have challenges. We all have problems. I'm going to communicate my needs, and then he gets to decide what he wants to do with that. I'm not going to already try to control his perception of me by picking, oh, when is a really good time to talk to him. Look, you have to trust, and that's what the queen does, right? The queen trusts that the man will tell her that. Men will tell you that if it's not the right time, right? But, so many women, they don't want to get into that situation where the man will tell them that or would tell them that, which oftentimes, by the way, they don't, because then they would feel embarrassed or they would feel ashamed or they would feel fill in the blank, right? Insecure, inadequate. And that's the very thing that the queen has already broken through, right? This is the shadows, and I talk a lot about this in other videos as well. Number 4 is a quality man can't resist a woman who is comfortable in the unknown. So, comfortable in the unknown can mean flirting, because flirting creates tension, doesn't it? When you flirt, you're sending out a signal and you don't know if it lands the same way, if it's interpreted the same way than the way you send it. So it feels in a way very vulnerable and really raw. And so what a man really loves, is when a woman is truly aligned in her magnetism, right? And just like in her playfulness and comfortable in the unknown. Also meaning, like, if she says something that, she doesn't know yet what she thinks about that. Maybe she shared something, what she believes politically, or that she's a vegetarian, or some worldview or some strong opinion she has. And now she didn't maybe get the response that she wanted from the man. So there's the unknown on a date, let's say. And then there's the tension that creates itself inside of her because of the unknown, right? And so the woman that is truly connected to her queen is actually very comfortable in that unknown, right? Okay, I have tension inside of myself, no worries, right? She breathes through them. Now, what she doesn't do is laugh them away, make fun of it, right? We call it like shame shields. And Brené Brown talks a lot about that in her shame research, but instead just said, okay, let me take a deep breath, allow the man to feel into the impact that what I shared just had on him, and let him find himself, let him create his own emotional map inside of himself, as opposed to, oh, let me over talk and let me over explain and let me do all these things, right? So, all right, so with that, if that's something that you're struggling with, take our free Magnetize Your Mind quiz to get a loving, long-term, and committed relationship with a man you desire fast. And the link of that, of course, is in the description below. Or you can simply hop on over to magnetizeyourman.com. All right, number 3 is men extremely magnetized to women who are connected to their intuition. I love that, right? They're connected to their supernatural gifts, and especially if you're Christian, supernatural gifts of the Holy Spirit. And what that really means is that the woman, they're really saying, right, like, I am trusting a higher power. I'm not just connected to my ego. I'm not just leaning onto my own understanding, but I'm leaning onto God's understanding, right? And what that does is it increases the capacity of a woman to be magnetic, to also to trust her true purpose, or whatever that is, by the way, right? It can be like being a stay-at-home mom. It can be like running a Fortune 500 or 100 or 50 company. We had everything and in between, right? And oftentimes the single successful women that come to us from all over the world, they're actually naturally very intuitive, but because of the psychological abuse or dismissal, the abandonment wound that has occurred from childhood, they actually override that intuition. And I always say, hey, aren't you using that in your career, right? And it hasn't gotten you that actually like pretty far in your career. And yeah, it sure has. And so they're connected to their intuition. And that also means like they're letting go of their mind. And that's naturally very intriguing, because a man will think, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. But yet, this woman has so much conviction about moving to a different country, or saying, tonight is not a good night for me. right? Just really being so aware of herself and so aware of the fabric, like her intuition picks up on those all those nuances of the energetic fabric around her, right? Like even like certain people that are around her, if they're safe, if they're not safe, to set boundaries, to speak, to not speak, to actually just really move very much from this very, like the void, I will say, because the intuition is something intangible, immeasurable. You can't really explain it, but you can embody it. And the man is going to feel that. And then the man is going to say, wow, I want more of that. Or I want to know where that's coming from. I want to explore that more, right? And Don Miguel Ruiz even says, we are the unknown to ourselves, right? So that woman is actually saying, I totally get that. I am in constant inquiry. You see, if you have the anxious attachment style, then you will want to create as much certainty and knowing as you possibly can. As a consequence of that, you of course project onto situations or people that you already know them, that you know how they think, that you already know what the outcome is going to be like. And the woman who's connected to her intuition, right, is actually saying, I don't know. Yeah, she's very comfortable in the I don't know-ness. And through that, of course, the intuition fortifies even more and causes more intrigue. So it becomes sort of this rhythm, right? This cycle that's very attractive. Now, along the similar lines, number 2 is range of emotion. So this particular woman has no fear to express all of her emotions. You see, so many women, of course, say, look, I had a rage monster of a dad, and so therefore, I don't want to express my anger. I will never be that angry, right? Or, my parents were always saying, don't cry, or give you something to cry about. So therefore, I will never connect to my sadness. I will always be staying connected to that logical adult part inside of me, but I will very much disown and disconnect from the child part, from the emotional intelligence part inside of me. Now, what it does, it costs you charisma, it costs you radiance, it costs you magnetism, it costs you feminine energy, right? Like it costs you like also beauty, right? Expressing self-expression of who you really are. And that makes you very invisible to good quality men that you really very much want to attract, right? So if you're like a lighthouse, you turn the lights off. So if they're like the captain on the ship, they can't find you because the light's off, right? But when you have that range of emotion, interesting, right? Freudian slip, range of emotion, and I say, wow, this woman, like, who is she? Like she expresses herself very confidently in her sadness, very confidently in her anger, very confidently in her happiness, very confidently in her confusion, whatever the case may be, right? She's secure with her insecurity. So again, she continues to be in inquiry with her emotions, and she doesn't pretend that she's secure with them, but she's secure with expressing whatever arises, as opposed to measuring it against and editing it against like what's socially acceptable or what they predict the man is gonna like. When we like have this anxious attachment style, a lot of us women become actually very manipulative, right? Because we're actually saying, what would this kind of man like? And then you start to walk on eggshells. You actually try to control his perception of you, which in and of itself is highly manipulative. And therefore, that's going to cost you emotional intimacy. That's oftentimes also why men walk out, why things fizzle out, why men start cheating, right? Because first and foremost, you started to cheat on yourself. So instead of being true to yourself, we're going to talk about it in point number 1, you actually abandon yourself. And then you get treated the way you treat yourself. And I've said that in many videos. And so like there's this myth, right, that you get treated the way you treat other people. That's not true. You get treated the way you treat yourself. So if you're compassionate with yourself, you get compassion from the man that you desire, right? Like if you're loving to yourself, if you're generous with yourself, if you're forgiving with yourself, then you send an unconscious model and expectation into the world, and you get that reflected back to you, right? So range of emotion, huge, very magnetic, because a man can't put you in a box. And again, he can also see then for himself, wait a minute, where is the repressed emotion inside of myself? Where am I hiding from myself? Where have I not expressed my own anger, right? Maybe I get frustrated, but maybe I don't allow myself to get angry because in my household, things were swept under the carpet, for example. Could be many different reasons, or sadness, same thing, right? So when I actually see, wow, it's emotionally safe to be with this woman, then actually start to connect with you on all levels and share more. I hear this from women so much. Their desire, the man, to share himself more with her, right? How he feels, what he thinks, where he's at, what his dreams are, what his goals are, what his vision is, and so on. Number one is authenticity. Now, I remember this one date I went on with a guy, gosh, this was at least 15 years ago, and he ordered this incredible cheesecake, red velvet, and I had a bite, and it was just like, it was like so authentic, and it was like connected to my senses, and he's like, I'll have a second one, right? And yes, of course, you could also say, well, it was also like pleasurable and sexual and, all of that, yes. And you also, the authenticity is really highly magnetic, right? Because there's this saying, right? Men admire perfect women, but they fall in love with imperfect ones. And part of the reason why is because he can actually connect with a woman who is authentic. Also, an authentic woman causes a state change. So she's not predictable, right? If you're out of the sudden, like started, I remember with my husband, I started to dance like a chicken. And I was just really like practicing, okay, what is it like to be a 3-year-old, right? Just what's moving through my body, making room for spontaneity as opposed to rehearsing everything in your head and acting logically and linear and predictable, right? Just like, what do I really want to do right now? Right? So I was doing a lot of these things that were just absolutely silly and crazy and made no sense. Also, authenticity went the other direction as well, where I called myself out. Like, right when my husband and I were dating for a while, and, I was upset about something, and I knew how I could manipulate him, but because I'd done a lot of personal development, I also knew like, oh man, now I thought about it. Now, if I want to be in true integrity, then I need to now say it, right? So I'm like, okay, well, okay, I got to walk up to my husband. And how scary is that? Because of course, that fearful part inside of me, that anxious part inside of me, the inner doubter, the inner critic inside of me, of course, was saying, are you insane? Have you lost your mind? If you tell your husband now that you wanted to manipulate him, he's never going to trust you again. And on top of that, you lose all your power, girlfriend, because you will never be able to manipulate him again. And so now he could manipulate you, or you could never be superior again. You see, this is how the ego talks to us, because it anticipates at some point there's going to be a worst case scenario, and therefore we need to stay in power, and therefore we need to stay superior. And of course, when you reflect back on your childhood, that, of course, is where it's coming from, and that's where you model it, right? So I told my husband, like, okay, look, a part of me wanted to manipulate you. Whew. Wow, that was a big moment. And he said, oh, really? Which part wanted to do that? Tell me more about it. And he thought it was so refreshing that I was so honest, that we had such a good laugh about it. And then a few weeks later, he shared something with me, what another part of him wanted to do. You see, we got so much more transparency. We were honeymooning forever and ever. Now we've been married for almost 11 years. 12 years together, right? So almost married for 11 years. And people always say, how are you like honeymooning like this, right? And it's because where can you be more transparent? Where can you be more authentic? Have you experienced the depth of emotional intimacy? Are you raw and real to each other, right? Do you have withholds? What's the story around that? So that's where you get to really look, right? And like, oh, can I trust why not? Do you feel you can trust yourself? Is that learned from childhood? Things like that. Have you forgiven yourself if you went for an abusive marriage relationship that I've seen so many times with my clients, right? Or is that where it's coming from? That you're still holding resentments towards yourself, towards your ex, and therefore also projected towards those good quality men. So that's the inquiry you get to be in. But when you break through that, right, like then honey's bees to honey, baby. That's when you attract all those good quality men into your life. And like my women always say, you will wonder, where have they been hiding? They're coming out of the woodworks. And then your new quality problem is to increase your capacity to receive all of that. Ladies, I had so much fun filming this video. I'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.